Boris Johnson isn't a politician. He's a populist, and populists are really celebrities.
Now, of course, you're here really to find out just how good a driver you are, I guess.
Yes, I have an idea about that.
You might think you know him. Lovable, affable, fun-loving, zip-wire riding Boris. In reality, he's much more complex and deeply flawed than the fun-loving Boris of the popular imagination. So here's everything you need to know about Boris Johnson. Right, let's start at the beginning with Eton College. Boris Johnson turns up at Eton, age 13, as a scholar. That makes him an elite within an elite within an elite because, of course, Eton is the most elite school in the world and the scholars are the most elite group within that elite. Boris, therefore, is imbued from childhood with this kind of incredible sense of entitlement and self-worth, and that never leaves him. The man Boris Johnson is in his mid-50s is that same little boy who turns up at school, age 13, thinking that the world belongs to him. And of course, famously, Boris Johnson once declared that his life's ambition was to be king of the world.
When he was about 4 years old, he told a family friend he wanted, whether he was asked, what would you like to be when you grew up? And he said, world king.
Aged 18, he's the star of the school and even gets cast in a production of Richard II. But Boris is too lazy or too preoccupied with other stuff to turn up. So he spends the entire period of rehearsals doing something else, whilst all the other actors turn up. Boris Johnson, star of the show, Richard II, the biggest part in Shakespeare, does not turn up. And on the day of the performance, he does turn up. But before the performance begins, he gets some little post-it notes, posts them around the courtyard where they're performing it, and puts his lines on it. Now, if you fuck up as badly as that, you might expect consequences. But Boris Johnson thought he could get away with everything. Having screwed up the production of Richard II, Boris Johnson's called to the headmaster's office. Boris wants to be head boy. He thinks he deserves it. After all, he's Boris Johnson. But he doesn't become head boy. And the reason he doesn't become head boy is because finally Eton has caught on to who he is. His headmaster has worked out that he's a lazy, easy rider who doesn't want to learn his lines or put in the work. So they don't make him head boy. Boris Johnson gets the hump. And by all accounts, he's had the hump about it ever since. From school, Boris Johnson goes on to Oxford University. Proper man of the people stuff. And there he becomes part of the so-called Bullingdon Club, which is like an elite dining group full of rich, pampered boys. And their modus operandi is to go out to restaurants, get incredibly drunk, eat fine food, and then smash the entire place up. The following morning, they return and chuck money at the problem and walk away. And nothing's changed since. While he's at Oxford, Boris Johnson decides that he's going to become the president of the Oxford Union. He failed to be the head boy of Eton, so he'll do that instead. The trouble is that, say what you like about people at Oxford, but they're quite clever, and they cotton on to Boris Johnson, and they decide that he's not the man for the job. So he goes around for 2 years manipulating people, pretending he's something he's not. He plays the liberal. Liberalism was very popular at the time. The Liberal Democrats, then still known as the SDP, were on the rise and were a big group at Oxford. So Boris hints that he's really SDP, not Conservative. And eventually he gets the prize. He becomes president of the Oxford Union. But he doesn't know what to do with the prize. And again, there's a pattern there. This is exactly what happens whenever Boris gets the big gig. He doesn't know what to do next. But having left Oxford in the very late 80s, he lands a job as a journalist at the Times. And this really is the beginning of modern Boris Johnson. This is the start of the rise to power. So Boris is working at the Times. He's a trainee journalist, and a few months in, he's writing a story about King Edward, and he thinks, my godfather knows a lot about King Edward because he's a famous academic. So he tries to ring up his godfather, maybe tries once or twice, can't get through, and in the end thinks, fuck it, I'll just make up a quote. So he makes up a quote, attributes it to his godfather. His godfather reads the copy, thinks I never said that, and Boris gets the sack. Now, if you or I were to lose our jobs for lying, it would be a CV disaster. You would have to claw back, possibly over years. Boris Johnson just goes into the ascendancy. Within a few months, he's working at the Telegraph. Fairly swiftly, Boris Johnson is dispatched to Brussels to become the EU correspondent for the Telegraph. But the trouble with the EU is that most of the things they do to improve people's lives are just incredibly boring, and Boris gets incredibly bored. So he starts to make stuff up. He starts pretending that the EU are going to ban crisps and double-decker buses and all manner of other bullshit. It doesn't matter that it's a load of old bollocks. People just buy into it. They genuinely think that they're going to have their prawn crisps taken away from them and their double-decker buses crushed in a great big crusher. Now, you can actually trace back a lot of the lies about EU policy to Boris Johnson. He being bored in Brussels. It's as simple as that. From the Telegraph, Boris gets a job at The Spectator. He actually gets the job on the promise that under no circumstances will he try to become an MP. So within a few months, he becomes a Conservative MP. While at The Spectator, and simultaneously while a member of the Conservative Party, he does pretty much fuck all before becoming mayor twice, in which he does pretty much fuck all, until famously he gets caught on a zip wire and becomes an international celebrity.
It's a bird. It's a plane. Is it? It could be. Let's have a look.
I don't know about you. I would rather those people who just remained in light entertainment and didn't go on to become the Prime Minister of Great Britain. Boris Johnson wants to become Prime Minister, but he's got a problem. A boy from 2 years below him at school called David Cameron has got the gig instead. Boris Johnson doesn't want to be the Mayor of London. He wants to be Prime Minister, and he's a little bit peeved that David, from 2 years below, has got the job and he hasn't. So Boris Johnson latches on to the Brexit course for no other reason than that he calculates that it could end with him being Prime Minister.
Let's deal with your arguments. One of them is on the side of this bus. We send 350 million to Europe. We don't. And you know we don't. No, we don't. You know we don't. Admit that that figure is grotesquely misleading at best.
I won't. I'll tell you why.
I don't need to tell you about what happened with the EU referendum, but by fronting it, Boris Johnson became the man of the people. The notion that this rich, pampered boy with this exceptionally privileged background should be the man of the people is utter drivel. But he manages it, and people turn out. Boris is a star. He's the star of the Conservative Party, and he's the star of British politics. And his slow ascent from 2016 to the end of 2019, the summer of that year, sees him push and shove his way into that position, just like he pushed and shoved that little boy and actually wrestles one of them to the ground whilst he's carrying the ball. And pretty much over the 4 years from the EU referendum, that's what he did in politics. He was determined to get the prize, and eventually in the summer of 2019, he did get it. But once again, having got the prize in 2019, Boris Johnson was in much the same position he'd been in when he was cast in the role of Richard II. He was too lazy to learn the lines, and just as when he was president of the Oxford Union, he didn't know what to do with the prize. But all the while, across the world, a disaster was coming, a tsunami, if you like, and that tsunami was coronavirus. Boris Johnson is probably the most singularly ill-equipped person in British politics to deal with a major pandemic. He's lazy. He likes the baubles and he likes the titles, but he can't really lead. He imagines himself to be a sort of Churchill figure who can just use robust big words and lovely language and that everything will be fine. But actually, Churchill wasn't just the big speeches. Churchill was leadership, and Boris Johnson doesn't have that skill. Boris Johnson is about Boris Johnson and has been since he was 8 years old.